Hey everyone, what is going on? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Brian, and today we are wrapping up the pours from 2022. Yes, we are talking about the summation of things that I tried throughout the year and putting out my top lists. And the first list that we're going to be going through is both store picks as well as craft whiskey. Now, the main reason I did this is because several of the picks I tried are craft brands, while some other of them are legacy brands. I tried at the very beginning of the year to separate two categories: my favorite craft whiskeys and my favorite store picks. And then when it got towards the end of the year, there were only a couple that I had sectioned out in the individual ones. And I figured, why not just bring these together? Let me preface about this specific list. The other list you're gonna see me do is my top rare and limited releases. Now, that doesn't mean that these picks are any less limited. I don't mean that in an offensive way. What I mean is these, for the most part, are going to be single barrel picks that I tried throughout the year. What my encouragement is to you is that maybe it exposes you to other brands that you haven't branched out to try, or at least maybe another brand that has a store pick from a group or store in your area that maybe you can try and start to build familiarity with what the store brings in, with what the group brings in, or start to continue to find the things that you like in whiskey that is a little bit more available to find given these groups' releases. That also is to be said that if this is a single barrel product, your miles may vary in the particular bottle that you get if you try one from a similar run, or again from this distillery, but a different unique single barrel. Let's go ahead and jump into some honorable mentions on the list. The first of which I want to talk about is Kings County Barrel Strength. This is one that I got a chance to do a review video on. You can see that over here. And I spent some time with this one, and it was my first exposure to the brand. And I really liked this in terms of like that kind of gripping, heavy profile that kind of leans into some of the notes that you get into craft whiskey. And I found it really, really enjoyable. It really packed with flavor. Some might say it's a little too hot, a little bit too heated, a little bit maybe too grainy, but the flavors that it has all together, I think, play really nicely. And so one of my honorable mentions, a brand that I'd like to spend some more time with this year, Kings County. Now, another one that I wanted to talk about is the Blue Note Juke Joint. Now, I've not tried any Blue Note Juke Joint, so why am I bringing this up here? Well, I've been able to try some cask strength expressions from Green River. And so it had me, when I tried those, and I've just been blown away by what kind of flavor these whiskeys have at their age. Once I realized that Juke Joint sources from here, I started thinking, man, this is something I need to try, and I've yet to do it. I know other people have, so hopefully if you've tried those, let me know what your all's thoughts have been down below. Let me know if that's something I should continue to seek out in 2023. But again, as an honorable mention, we're gonna go ahead and throw all that out there. Blue Note Juke Joints. The third of which is something I only tried once. One of my coworkers brought it in on a recent trip that he had from Austin, Texas, and that's still Austin. He had grabbed one of Nancy Fraley's picks that were in the gift shop there, cask strength, and I was incredibly impressed. For a Texas whiskey, it didn't taste anything like what I've assumed. It had a lot of great sweetness. It actually had a really nice amount of oak presence as well. And that lack of graininess and the presence of maturity are things that I really look for when I'm tasting craft whiskeys or things that are younger in age. So being 4.5 years old, I was quite impressed. It kind of played a little bit similar to maybe some of the flavors of a New Riff, especially because it had 25% rye, but it didn't taste like it had 25% rye. It tasted easy drinking, had an appropriate amount of spice, and something, again, I wish I had a little bit more time with, or other picks. Again, if you've tried some Still Austin, leave me some comments down below. Let me know if those are good suggestions. But that wraps up honorable mentions. Let's go ahead and dig into number 10 on the list. And that happens to be Penelope's 13-year American light whiskey. I have a video that I did earlier on in the year about this pour. 134.6 proof is the bottle that I had. Very high proof, but I tried several brands. Bull Run, we tried Obtainium, and then this Penelope here. And I was really impressed mainly with this because it had all that sugary sweetness that you know from American light whiskeys, a little bit of age coming in there because it is sort of older there too. But there was this key lime pie note that happened in this pour specifically when I first had that bottle open, and that was a really unique flavor for me to come by. especially in this style of whiskey. This one is a little easygoing. It is still very sweet, but it doesn't have as much sweetness as other American light whiskeys do. And for that reason, while I don't drink it all the time, I find it easier to drink than some of the other very birthday cake sweet like American light whiskeys out there. So number 10 on the list, Penelope's 13-year American light whiskey. Moving into number 9 is something that we actually got to do an entry proof pick of, but that's not the one I'm talking about today. It is Driftless Glen. This is a pick from Aman's in Wisconsin, coming in at 116 proof. It is just the Driftless Glen bourbon. And from this pour here, this is what I modeled our pick after. I said, if our pick can taste any bit as good as this, then we're doing a good job. But I've tried other local picks as well from Driftless Glen, and I'm very impressed for the price and for what seems like the availability of most stores to have a pick of Driftless Glen. It's something that I think everyone needs to pick up to have on the shelf. The price point is really good for a cask strength whiskey in its age. And then it has a relatively high malt content. And I think that comes through in a very appropriate kind of malty, grainy profile that comes off kind of chocolate malt mixed in with the sweetness, mixed in with the oak. It has great spice, mintiness, and then again, that chocolate malt that kind of lingers on, gives it some heaviness. I don't know, it's kind of a balance between American single malts in bourbon, and we're seeing more American single malts turn on, and so I feel like it's kind of another nice bridge pour to have, but one that I've been incredibly happy to go to drink, and it's very easy, I feel like, to come by another from another place, another pick, if I were to run out of that. So number 9, Driftless Glen, Aman's pick. Moving into number 8, also comes from Driftless Glen. This is one of our entry proof picks that we did that we call Big Deck Energy. It is a pick with seal box. This is, I don't even remember, a 5 or 6 year rye. But the thing about these ryes, they had a run of some ryes that were in smaller barrels. And so the flavors were very concentrated, very intense, very sweet. I also had a pick similar to this from Bourbon Pursuit that I tried. And you get these very ramped up peach candy, peach ring notes mixed with this kind of minty, sugary finish. So to me, I call it a peach mint julep in a glass. So think about Old Forester peach mint julep, and that's what you get in this, but cask strength, super robust, super intense, and incredibly drinkable, knowing that it is still very intense, very syrupy. Makes a heck of a cocktail. But aside from that, is also just basically a cocktail in a glass on its own. When you get into some of those peachy stone fruit notes, I'm a sucker for those. So getting that into a really well-aged and affordable rye whiskey, that's a winner for me. So coming in at number 8 was the Driftless Glen entry proof rye pick. This was another pick that Drew P. Whiskey and I joined Blake from Sealbox on, and it is Starlight finished in Pinot de Chiron. Now, we did not get to brand any of these for entry proof. They were barrels for Sealbox, but when we were there and we tasted all types of barrels, we had earmarked, if we were going in on some of these barrels, which ones would we have picked? And there was a bourbon we really liked, there was a rye we really liked, there was a Oloroso sherry finished product that we really liked, and then this Pinot de Chiron was just wild. Now, look at this color. This is actually what I'm sipping in my glass right now. It has a super cola-like dark color to it. And while there's nothing necessarily standout, it doesn't seem like, about the whiskey that is finished in this barrel, it picks up all these crazy floral, wine-like, sweet notes. So if you like these sweeter wine finished pours, if you like dessert-style wines, this has such a heavy influence on here. Lots of cola-like notes, lots of syrupy, sugary notes finishing this out. It's very much a dessert pour. It's very much in the same kind of veins as an espresso martini. Now, while it doesn't taste like an espresso martini, if you're familiar with that, you're going to be in familiar territory with this pour. Very nice evening desserty nightcap. That is number 7 on the list, the Starlight Pinot de Chiron finished. We move right into another Pinot de Chiron finished barrel. This is barrel 6140 from Westland Distillery that I do not have. Porkins sent me a sample of this, and when he did, I fell in love with it. I was never able to acquire a bottle of it, though I still would like to. This one takes the Pinot de Chiron. It is American single malt. It is 4 years old aged and aged 3 additional years in Pinot de Chiron. And what you get there, unlike the fruity, sugary, sweet characteristics that you might get in the Starlight, that American single malt cuts through and you get these big, huge, flavorful notes A lot of cherry, a lot of fruit notes, but also met with a lot of maple notes. Interesting complexity, very hefty, very full. You feel it the whole way. And it was very unique to me. I kept coming back to it. It was my favorite of all the Westland samples I was able to try this year. Again, I'd love to try more from that. That is number 6, Westland 6140 American Single Malt and Pinot de Chiron. All right, we are moving into the top 5. And in 5th place, we have a Stag pick, the first that I got that's Stag and not Stag Jr. Pick from Kroger here in town. This comes in at 133.4 proof. And as we've talked about on the channel before, we know that I'm not an enormous Buffalo Trace drinker. We know that I'm not a very big Stag/Stag Jr. fan as well. Last year, we did talk about this Cox's Evergreen pick that was a little bit off profile and really enjoyable. Great pour that I had on this list also last year. This one brings in some of the familiar notes that you're usually finding in Stag, but it does it really well. It is taking something that, and again, it's very high proof, but compared to some of the other pours that we've recently talked about, it ramps up the flavor. It is intense and coating, huge hug, and the oak picks up a little bit too, even though it's probably not all that old. It just has this big cherry, big kind of cola-like sweetness with a nice oaky hug to it. Classic Stag/Stag Jr. profile, very flavorful, very intense, and very welcoming here to the list of top picks. Number 5, Stag from Kroger. Now, once it got to this point in the list, some of these picks kind of ebbed and flowed a little bit depending on when I was tasting them, how I was tasting them. So keep that in mind. You know, these are relative. These are all really, really good. And we are moving into number 4, which happens to be a Four Roses OESO from Bill's Package Store. This is part of a newer run at the time of OESO recipes. It dropped back down to 9 years old from the HE36 run. Tier 3. Now, this was a bottle that released at an event that we went to in the middle of the year. If you follow me on social media, you probably saw pictures. Maybe you saw them on some of your Facebook groups or something like that of all bottles shared with all these Four Roses bottles, over 100 Four Roses bottles. And that's where this particular thing released. It was a big charity event for special ops excursions. And this was one of the 2 barrels that they released there. And what I appreciate about this is that I'm not necessarily an OESO lover when it comes to Four Roses. Let's get a little bit of inside baseball here. However, the HE36 run, this barrel specifically, kind of brought all of my love back for the OESO run. There were several bottles that I had of what was previously the run that they were pulling from. And I thought they were a little too bubblegum sweet. They were a little too candied in an artificial way. And I was not a big fan of that. But this here brings back a lot of liveliness, a lot of sugariness, a lot of fruitiness. So if you like that about Four Roses, you like that big fruity profile, big candied profile, and not a lot of oak, you're gonna find that probably in this run, at least as the barrels are younger. And this one specifically was just super enjoyable, super drinkable, especially if you're a Four Roses fan. If you're not a Four Roses fan, you might not like this. It's still gonna taste like Four Roses profile. It just was a really good example, not only of a Four Roses pick, but also of the OESO recipe. That is number 4, the Bill's OESO Four Roses. All right, this was a late entry into this particular list. This happens to be a Jack Daniel's single barrel from Bourbon Pursuit in keg and bottle. It is the second half of 2 barrels they put out, Perfect Strangers. And I believe, and I might be wrong, there was a Jack Daniel's single barrel that was on my list last year as well. But if there wasn't, you know, you've probably heard me talk before or saw other videos where I've compared Old Forester barrel strengths to Jack Daniel's barrel proof single barrels. And for the most part, I find Old Forester barrel strengths to be pretty hot. And I've enjoyed a lot of the Jack Daniel's single barrels. This is no expression. I've probably said it about a couple of single barrels already, but this one to me tastes like a younger King of Kentucky. Like it is a prince of Kentucky. It is in line to the throne. It has those same kind of char, sweetness flavors, dark fruit, tobacco, a little bit of espresso. It's that char that finishes it that really reminds me of King of Kentucky. From the nose to the palate, lingers with that kind of deep, resonant oak and spice. It is 131.1 proof. It drinks maybe a little bit lighter than that, but it definitely drinks full and rich and coating and flavorful. And it's just an amazing single barrel. Honestly, at the time of recording this, I think this is still available. I'll link it down below in case anyone is interested in picking that up again at the time of this recording. But number 3, very impressive here with the Jack Daniel's single barrel proof from Bourbon Pursuit and Keg and Bottle. All right, here we are in the final 2. Another tough one here, but I gotta stick to my guns. This one is not pictured to the same bottle, but this comes from Rare Character, and this is an Amburana finished straight rye whiskey. This one is for our bourbon, but this is not the one that I tried. Obviously, I just got this one in. I have not opened it yet, but the pick that I'm referencing is the one that I had from Justin's House of Bourbon or Bourbon Outfitters. My buddy let me have a sample of this bottle. I was not able to procure one, but man, talk about an explosion of flavor. And I'm gonna eat my own words here a little bit, because I had said last year, whoever is putting Seagrass at the top of the list has to be wrong. This is an abomination. How can this be your favorite whiskey of the year? You just can't have something with all these finishes in there and it be your top whiskey of the year. And here I am in my top craft and picks of the year, putting an Amburana finished rye whiskey at the top of the list. And I feel like I'm eating my own words here. But the flavors that come out of here, while it's not a pour I can drink all the time because of how intense it is, this is a unique pour. I'm not a stranger to the Starlight cigar batches, and I've tried several other things in Amburana. You're gonna see a myriad of people releasing barrels with Amburana finishes because it's become so popular. But these cinnamon roll-like notes combined with this rye whiskey that kind of cuts through, I think, as well in here. You get a well-aged rye whiskey with all these complex, nuance, spice, and sweet notes. And I love it. I think that I appreciate it more, even though I still like them, than the Starlights that I have also. But there was just something about this when I tried it. I was like, this is it. This is delicious. It's fantastic. And it was almost number 1. However, there's been a barrel that released at the very beginning of the year. It's been on my mind the whole time. And that's what we're talking about as the number 1 barrel of the year. Again, from Kroger. This has got a good memory to it too, because Drew was in town with me and we were around, we were getting some content, and we heard this release at one of the Krogers in town. We sped back from Bardstown. We went over there and got this 11-year Elijah Craig single barrel. And man, this is delicious. I've been really enjoying the Elijah Craig barrel proof picks that have come out since they've come out. A lot of varying flavor, not necessarily a lot of money to put in there for really well-aged pours and a lot of variants. So it's one of the newer lines of whiskey that I've been really into. You probably remember from last year, I was also a big fan of Elijah Craig picks in general for a similar reason, but these barrel strengths have had a lot of varying flavor. Really enjoyable, really interesting. This pick is no exception. My favorite private barrel of Elijah Craig barrel proof that I've probably had to date. But again, I've had several of them. They're all really enjoyable. This one just tops the list for me this year. 11-year Elijah Craig barrel proof private pick from Kroger. Let's do a quick little summary of things from the year. I will say this is a little bit of a spoiler, but it's in line with what I mentioned last year. The spread of enjoyment from top 10 to number 1 on this list is very narrow. It's very tight. There, any given day, any of these are really solid pours, and that's why I give them as recommendations to you. The thing that's interesting about the top 10 rare and limited list is that it's actually a lot wider. What's number 10 on that list and what's number 1 on that list, at least in its current form, they're very different flavor experiences between the two. So much so that I would say a majority of the ones on this list, specifically in the top 5, are likely going to be more enjoyable than the ones in the bottom 5 of my rare and limited list. And that's probably what you want, right? We want a nice mix where we're not always chasing after rare and allocated stuff. Again, these are single barrels. These specific barrels might not be easy for you to find, but my hope is that if you follow Sealbox, if you follow a group that's nearby, or you support somebody on Patreon, or you have a store locally that you visit, that you're gonna have access to barrels like this as well for yourself, that you won't have to rush for, you won't have to stand in line for, you won't have to pay an arm and a leg for, and you'll be able to experience really unique, enjoyable flavors from finished products to American single malts to bourbons and the whole gamut in between, young, old, everything. And you'll have a really nice mix of flavors. Guys, let me know what your all's thoughts are on this list or some of your favorite picks, craft whiskeys that you've tried this year as well. Leave me some messages down below. I look forward to hearing what you all have to say about that. Let me know if you want to hear more about some of these. Again, I've been probably tagging some of these videos up here if they're ones that I've done previous reviews on. So I'd love to hear what your all's thoughts are on that. Look forward to the next video that we have putting out. It's the top 10 rare and limited list of 2022. As always, everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks for a great year here on the channel. And until next time, we'll see you all later.